Today I'm here to talk about the rhetorical choices and devices used in Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford University on June 12, 2005. Throughout the speech, Steve Jobs talks about his own life experience and how he connected the dots to his life now.
I'm honored to be with you today for your commencement from one of the finest universities in the world. Truth be told, I never graduated from college, and this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation. Today, I want to tell you 3 stories from my life. That's it. No big deal. Just 3 stories. The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why'd I drop out? It started before I was born. My biological mother was a young, unwed graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. Except that when I popped out, they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl. So my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night asking, "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said, "Of course." My biological mother found out later that my mother had never graduated from college and that my father had never graduated from high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers. She only relented a few months later when my parents promised that I would go to college. This was the start in my life. And 17 years later, I did go to college. But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford. And all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting. It wasn't so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example.
The soapstone of the commencement speech is the speaker is Steve Jobs. The occasion is June 12, 2005 at Stanford University's graduation ceremony. The audience is the college students, professors, and parents of students at Stanford. The purpose is to inspire the graduates to do what they love in life and to never give up when a window of life closes. The subject is Steve presenting his own life experiences that led him to where he is today, and the tone is uplifting, inspiring, empathetic, and sad. Now moving on to the rhetorical triangle, we'll start with ethos. Steve built his credibility by talking about his major multi-million company, Apple. He said, "I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from the garage into a $2 billion company." This just shows how influential his company is. Most people today have iPhones, iPods, MacBooks, or iPads, so he builds trust throughout his readers. Also, Pixar, he talks about Pixar, which is his animation company, and he says, "Pixar went on to create the world's first computer animated feature film, Toy Story, and is now the most successful animation studio in the world. Many of us have watched Toy Story and many of his other movies." He also talks how he was just another college student like everyone else. He didn't have a dorm room to sleep in, so he slept on his friend's floor in his room. He returned Coke bottles for 5-cent deposits to buy food with. This shows that he relates among the college students who are struggling with moving on with life, that he was just in their same position at one point. With all the companies he started and worked at, and all the influence he's had on technology throughout the years, the graduates definitely value his advice and what he has to say. Steve uses a lot of examples of pathos throughout his speech. He grabs the audience's attention by invoking their emotions. In one way, he shares his encounters with cancer and death. He said, "The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable, and that I should expect to live no longer than 3 to 6 months. My doctor advised me to go home and get my affairs in order," which was code for prepare to die. This grabbed the audience's emotions because he's talking about his encounter with death. Another way he talks about or brings up pathos is when he talks about getting fired from his own company, which set him down. "I was a public failure, and I even thought about running away from the valley, but something slowly began to dawn on me that I still loved what I did." Another example of pathos he uses is when he talks about his upbringing with his company. He said he would walk 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week. All of these examples grab the emotions of the audience because he shows his hard times throughout life, but he's persevered, and now look where he is today. Moving on to the last part of the rhetorical triangle is logos. Steve used lots of examples of logos throughout the speech. One way he used it was through his famous quote, again, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards." This refers to logic that in order to move on in life, you have to trust yourself, your gut, and your beliefs. Another way he used logos was his facts about his company. In 10 years, Apple had grown into a $2 billion company with over 40,000 employees. This is showing the statistics of his growing company. One rhetorical device Steve uses throughout the speech is repetition. He says, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by a dogma, which is living with results of other people's thinking, and don't let the voice of others' opinions crown out your own inner voice." He uses repetition of the word "don't" to give advice and really get across his point. Another form of repetition is when Steve uses the word graduate 4 times in the first paragraph. The effect of this is to show how wrapped up society is with graduating from college and high school. But earlier in the speech, he tells his audience he never graduated college and is still one of the top inventors and most influential people in the world. Another rhetorical device Jobs used throughout the speech is in a hyperbole. When Steve talks about when he got fired from his own company, he said, "Sometimes life hits you in the head with a brick." He doesn't actually mean getting hit with a brick, but he is rather referring to the difficulties in life when things don't go your way. Throughout the speech, Jobs also uses humor. And one way he uses humor was when talking about when he got diagnosed with cancer. He got diagnosed with pancreas cancer, and he said, "I didn't even know what a pancreas was." This is allowing the audience to feel more comfortable and relaxed when listening to his speech. Throughout the whole speech, Jobs refers to the phrase, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." He repeats this phrase because it is the whole idea of his speech, to always be willing to try new things and continue to push through the story of life. Jobs organizes his speech into 3 parts. He does this to keep his listeners engaged and makes it easier to follow his speech, and it also allows the listeners to think about their own lives incorporated in his story. His first story is about connecting the dots, which talks about his life story growing up and how all it took was one class during a rough time in life to figure out what he loves. He talks about how you have to trust your gut and instincts in order to connect the dots in life. The second story is about love and loss. Once he found his love, he started Apple. As Apple grew, he ended up getting fired from his company after a falling out, which lit more fire under him. This taught him to keep doing what you love and to go back to square one and rebuild from there. His third story was about death. Jobs talks about when he got diagnosed with cancer and was projected to die. This made him change his mindset to not waste life and live every day like it's your last, and to follow your own journey. Jobs uses simple diction throughout the whole speech to make it very relatable to the graduates. Another rhetorical device Jobs uses is personification. Death is very likely the single best invention of life. The purpose of this is to show that death isn't actually an invention, but it invented his new lifestyle of thinking every day could be my last. This speech changed the world because it taught people to love what they do in life, because you spend majority of your life doing it, and also to live every day like it's your last. Steve Jobs used a variety of rhetorical choices to persuade his audience of what his message was.